Welcome to this explainer. I'm putting on my clinical educator hat today, and I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through what I consider a really crucial lesson on optical dispensing. Okay, let's just dive right into this, because we're about to completely change the way you look at a pair of glasses. We're not talking about fashion accessories today, folks. We're looking at complex, molecularly engineered medical devices.
Now, I want you to really think about this quote. A weak dispenser sells a frame because it looks good. A professional dispenser selects a frame because it is scientifically suitable. Honestly, that just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It completely dismantles the layperson's view. When an untrained person walks into a dispensary, they throw around words like plastic, metal, branded, or, expensive. But for a professional optometrist or dispensing optician, that language just isn't going to cut it. Our core thesis today is that a frame is a clinical optical device. It has to hold lenses accurately in front of a patient's eyes. It's all about molecular structures, understanding the coefficient of friction, tensile strength, and biocompatibility. It's not just about aesthetics.
So, here's our syllabus for today. We're going to start with the paradigm shift of science over fashion, then move into plastic frame science and examine metal alloys. After that, we'll match these materials to our patients and wrap up with some clinical adjustment rules.
All right, Section 1, Science over Fashion, the Clinical Paradigm Shift.
Section 2, Plastic Frame Science, the Molecular Foundations.
Now, while plastics definitely offer incredible cosmetic variety, the reality is that materials like acetate, propionate, and optal, they behave entirely differently from one another at a molecular level. To really understand them, we have to start with the chemical baseline. Most plastic frames are polymers, basically large molecules made of repeating monomers. And this brilliantly illustrates why frames act the way they do. It's the chain length, the intermolecular bonding, and the cross-linking that dictates if a frame is going to bend, melt, or literally snap right in your hands. What's really fascinating here is the concept of a thermoplastic. Cellulose acetate, which is derived from cotton linters and wood pulp, is pretty much the gold standard here. When you heat it, the intermolecular bonds loosen up and the material becomes nice and soft. Then, when it cools down, the molecular movement reduces and boom, the new shape is locked in. This heat-based reshaping is exactly why acetate is so highly valued for precise clinical adjustments. But contrast that with a thermoset material, like Optio, which is actually an epoxy resin. Thermosets have a cross-linked, three-dimensional molecular network. They literally have a thermal memory. So the absolutely crucial point here is this. If you treat a thermoset like a standard thermoplastic and try to cold bend it, it will snap, no question. It requires a completely different approach.
When we put acetate and cellulose propionate head-to-head, the confusion between the two causes so many careless mistakes in the lab. Propionate is injection molded, right? Making it thinner and lighter? Sure, but it has a much lower heat tolerance. If you go ahead and heat propionate exactly like acetate, it's going to bubble, permanently distort, and honestly give off a really terrible smell. Plus, if your patient cleans their propionate frames with alcohol, it causes stress cracking, what we call crazing, a total nightmare.
Moving on to Section 3, Metal Frame Alloys, Strength, Flexibility, and Biocompatibility. So metal frames are elegant and thin, right? But how do we balance that cosmetic appeal with the very real risks of corrosion, plating failure, and patient fatigue? Well, imagine this real-world clinical scenario. A 28-year-old patient comes back to your clinic 2 weeks after you dispensed a brand new metal frame. They're complaining of itching, redness, and a lovely green rash right behind their ears. What went wrong here?
The answer is all about the chemistry of Manel. Manel is sort of the workhorse of the industry. It's cheap, it's easy to solder, and highly malleable. But it contains 63 to 70% nickel. When human sweat, which is packed with sodium chloride and lactic acid, interacts with that nickel, it creates a green tarnish called nickel chloride. And that triggers a type 4 delayed hypersensitivity reaction. Suddenly, your economical frame is a medical disaster for someone with sensitive skin.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates why material choice is absolutely paramount. Just compare monol with pure titanium. Titanium is the premier material. When exposed to oxygen, titanium forms this chemically stable passive oxide layer right on its surface. This layer completely prevents the release of those irritating ions into the skin. So it makes the frame incredibly lightweight, incredibly strong, and entirely hypoallergenic. A real game changer.
We actually see a very similar protective behavior in stainless steel 316L. It utilizes a fascinating process called passivation. The chromium in the alloy forms an invisible chromium oxide layer that stops rust in its tracks. And what's really cool is that stainless steel actually becomes stronger when you bend it. This is a property known as work hardening, and it allows for amazingly strong yet delicate frame designs.
Now, I do need to deliver a pretty stark clinical warning about advanced composites like carbon fiber. Look, carbon fiber is made of filaments embedded in a resin matrix. It has an unbelievable strength-to-weight ratio, for sure, but it is almost entirely non-adjustable. So here is the rule. If it doesn't fit perfectly straight out of the box, do not dispense it, period. Just don't do it.
All right, Section 4, Matching Material to Patient, Real-World Clinical Application.
It is time to take all this abstract material science and actually apply it directly to patient care. Let's test our clinical logic with a high-minus case study. Okay, your patient has a -8 diopter prescription in both eyes. They walk up to the dispensing desk holding a large, thin, rimless metal frame. Should you proceed with this choice?
The answer is absolutely not. A high-minus lens is incredibly thick at the edges. A large, thin, rimless frame is only going to maximize that edge thickness, crank up the weight, and honestly result in really poor cosmesis. Instead, clinical logic dictates we opt for small eye sizes, round or oval shapes, and a really sturdy full-rim acetate or a stable stainless steel. We need to securely hide that edge thickness and maintain perfect centration.
Let's see how this builds across different patient lifestyles. Say you have a child or a sports player who needs maximum durability and impact resistance. A flexible polyamide like TR90 is essential. For an allergic patient, we immediately pivot to titanium or Optal. And for your standard office worker, titanium, stainless steel, or acetate are all highly appropriate. You see, we fit the chemistry to the life of the patient.
Let's bring it home with Section 5, Clinical Adjustment Rules, the right technique.
The absolute golden rule of the lab is this. Identify the material before you apply tools or heat. Guessing is just poor practice. Let's walk through a pretty high-stakes adjustment using Optal. Because it has thermal memory, you've got to heat the frame to approximately 120 degrees Celsius. You wait patiently for that cross-linked molecular network to soften up. Then you make your gentle adjustment, and this is the critical part, guys, you absolutely must cool it underwater right after. That locks in the new shape and successfully overrides its thermal memory.
So, to summarize our lab techniques, here are the worst dispensing mistakes you've got to avoid as a professional. 1. Never select by fashion and ignore nickel allergies. 2. Never overheat propionate until it bubbles. 3. Never ever bend Optal cold. 4. Keep alcohol far away from crazing sensitive plastics. And finally, never dispense carbon fiber if it doesn't fit the patient perfectly on day 1.
I want to leave you with what I call the ultimate manifesto of the clinical educator. The patient may judge a frame by color and style, but you must judge it by science. It is your clinical responsibility to ensure the eyewear is accurate, safe, stable, and chemically appropriate for the actual human being wearing it.
So, I leave you with this final, provocative thought to challenge your everyday practice. Are you just an ordinary frame seller driven by fashion and price tags? Or are you a trained dispensing professional wielding the power of molecular science to protect and serve your patients? The choice and the clinical responsibility is yours. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and keep elevating your practice.